we will convene our meeting and carry on. I am Julie Pierce, the temporary still chair of the Admin and Projects Committee. And we will first go to public comment. Are there any members in the audience who wish to comment on any item not listed on this morning's agenda? Seeing no one come forward, we'll close public comment. And we will go immediately to the election of the next Administration and Projects Committee Chair and Vice Chair for 2020. And I would take the chair's prerogative to nominate Tom Butt for Chair and Teresa Geringer as Vice Chair for the next year. Do I get a second? I'll second. I have a second from Bob Taylor. Any other nominations? Hearing none, I will ask for the vote. And we'll let Newell get in here and sit down. We knew you were parking the car. We were stalling. So I have a nomination on the floor for Tom Butt to be the next chair and Teresa Geringer to be the next vice chair. I would call for the vote, and that is all in favor. Please say aye. Aye. Oppose? That carries unanimously. Thank you. And I will hand the gavel to our next chairman, Mr. Butt.
Didn't I just do this? Didn't I just do this like a couple of
You did it for the whole authority. Now it's just the committee.
Okay. Next item is approval of minutes.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Are there any objections? Thank you. The minutes are approved unanimously. And next item is the consent calendar. Anybody want to take anything off the consent calendar?
Move approval.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. Are there any objections? Thank you. The consent calendar is approved. And that takes us to regular agenda items. Item 6.0, legislative update.
Good morning, Chair Butt and Commissioners. I will keep the federal update fairly brief because there's not a lot of news to report out of there. We are still following up from our very busy meeting-packed advocacy trip that we took in February with various folks on some of the different items that we're working on. It is budget season in Washington right now, so we are watching the various budget proposals fairly closely with our advocates there, and they are keeping their eye out for places where we might be able to position ourselves to get a bigger share of federal funding. And so we are just continuing to watch that, and I'm actually expecting that next month's report will probably be a bit meatier than the one you have in front of you. We also, happy to answer any questions about that. We also have our state advocate, Mark Watt, here, and I know there's a lot happening at the state level with the recent introduction of a flood of bills. So I will turn it over to him unless there's any questions.
Any questions on federal? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Pleased to be here. Regretful about the results from your election, and just encourage you to buckle down and go out and do it again. When I prepared the memo that's in your packet, that was the day before the deadline for the introduction of bills, and as Lindsay mentioned, there's been a flood. It's more like a fire hose going into a teacup. There was over 1,000 bills introduced that last week alone. Gone through them all. I'll be talking about a couple of them, but briefly, I just want to comment on the local tax issue. There's something happening out there. We're not sure which. There were 231 local taxes scheduled throughout the state on this primary election, which is significantly up compared to 4 years ago. And I think the thinking is obviously the primary is a good time to go in this state. There were 87 in 2016, 231. And when I looked at the chart put together by the Caltax, which is not complete yet, that shows green for pass, red for fail, and yellow for other. And a lot of these were general taxes, so they're 50%. So it looks like there's something going on right now. We will know better as we analyze all those results in the coming months. But I just want to put that on the table for you. Secondly, I just want to mention this week the Senate Transportation Committee conducted a hearing, invited in the Secretary of Transportation and other, the chair of CARB, to talk about greenhouse gas reduction efforts in the transportation area. This took off from the point where the governor had issued his executive order back in the fall that was received with some confusion. The secretary did spend some time during this hearing explaining that they've been organizing themselves. The goal of the executive order, as a reminder, is to develop a game plan using available resources to further hit the targets or get closer to the targets on greenhouse gas reduction in the transportation sector. He did indicate, and this is something a lot of us have been watching and trying to get comment on, they will be doing listening sessions and outreach to stakeholder groups. So, 4 months later from the executive, we're now hearing that they will be inviting some of us in to come in with our ideas. So just want to make you aware of that. Some of us who are involved in putting SB1 together are going to be watching to make sure they don't divert SB1 resources. In terms of bills, I just want to mention a couple right now. There's a whole list of ones that I'll be sharing now that we've gone through them all. But Assemblymember Chu introduced AB 2057 in spot bill form. There's intended amendments description. It's in your packet that talks about integrating the Bay Area Transit Agency ticketing and operations, and the jury's out in terms of, until we see the language in bill form, where people are going to land on taking positions. I think the transit operators in this area and throughout the region are nervous and concerned. So that is going to unfold in the coming weeks. I want to mention AB 2186 by Mr. Grayson. This is more of a cleanup and brings the local contract retention process more in line with the state. Still leaves discretion with local agencies to impose retention, doesn't take it off the table altogether, but it does provide a cap of 5% at any one point in time rather than having the 5% as a floor. So this is something I worked with your staff last year. We couldn't quite get into Mr. Grayson's bill. He committed to doing one this year, and this is that bill, and we've got quite a bit of support building behind that measure. Two other ones I'll just mention in passing. AB 2824 by Assemblymember Bonta would deal with a bus lane on the Bay Bridge. So wonder how that's going to work. Pave it down the middle? I mean, that's what you normally do when you're capping over bridges, right? I don't think it would work in this case. Secondarily, Senator Dodd has an interesting bill. This has been something coming for years. I've heard about this for the last decade or more, and this is addressing Route 37 and providing toll authority. This bill is SB 1408. It's not a direct impact, but it is a regional impact, so I thought I'd put it on your table so you're aware of it. And finally, we, with respect to the Faster Bay Area program that's subject to Senator Bell's SB 278, he had intended this week to spend time with the Bay Area Caucus. I was unable to find out if the caucus actually met. I don't think they did. I think it may be today, so we'll get some word out of that if that's the case. His intent is to present a framework to the caucus, and if the caucus buys in, then they would start filling in the blanks with language. So he's at the early stage of getting it ready for hearing in the Assembly Transportation Committee. We are working with Assemblymember Grayson's office as well as Mr. Frazier's office and other delegation members, but those two in particular on different aspects of what we may see. So we'll have to see how this all turns out. I think the Ed Bond, statewide Ed Bond Prop 13 collapse, the SMART, and all the other local tax issues are going to weigh heavily on those who are pushing for either the transportation, housing, or both included in the final bill, because 1% is going to be viewed as, I believe, is going to be viewed as a pretty heavy lift. So a long way to go on that, and we're at the starting gate. So I'll conclude my comments with that. Thank you.
Questions, comments? Neil?
Mark, first of all, thank you again, as always. On Choose Spot Bill 2057, it seems that the intent is to maybe make MTC as the super agency to have authority over all transportation agencies, that it would make sense to weigh in on this in giving suggestions, clearly coordinating transportation projects to serve the 9 Bay Area counties makes sense. But to be honest, MTC's history, their staffing, their skill sets does not put them in the position of being that lead agency that has all those skill sets to be successful. Great on paper, but in fact, you look at their history, you do an analysis of them versus an agency like ours. Their track record is probably one of the worst in the Bay Area. Projects are not on time. They're all over budget. They're a planning agency, a paper agency. It would seem that whether we support this or not, that we should be weighing in as an agency and our other regional agencies to say, makes sense, we create this entity, but the power of that should lie within these, having, like our executive director be a member of that board and or our chair, and creating a way that that entity is really driven by those agencies. But it's like the clearinghouse. It becomes that clearinghouse, and that absolutely makes sense. But I don't know other things, but I think somehow we need to weigh in. Otherwise, we're going to end up with MTC. They don't have the staff that we have. They have 10 times the staff we have, but yet they can't do what all of us as other agencies do.
Might I comment, Chair?
Yeah.
Briefly, I would just point out that there are at least two other major multi-county MPOs in the state. Neither one of them have the kind of authority that you're speaking to at this point in time. And I think that, and the one in Southern California is the largest MPO in the country. So that would be the one you would think would have some more programmatic and implementation authority if you're going to try it out in the state. So I think there's a reason to be cautious, and I think we got to I would recommend taking a very close look as this language matures.
Randy?
Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Cahan's district director wanted comments, and so Peter gathered comments, and we've sent it over to her office from our transit operators on some of their concerns about this. I think czar is the right term that they've been using, but so we try to engage in the dialogue on that.
Okay, anything else? All right, onward to item 7. Approval of fiscal year 2019-20 mid-year budget for Contra Costa Transportation Authority and Congestion Management Agency.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Brian Kelleher, the Chief Financial Officer. I wanted to just take this moment and briefly just talk about some economic impacts that are facing obviously the nation and then locally and different things like that. So when we go through and we put the budget together, we have to forecast our sales tax. When we put together the 2019 strategic plan, we had worked with HDL to talk about sales tax. We had anticipated $91.8 million for this fiscal year because there was going to be a recession. Up until about a month ago, we didn't think that was going to happen here. We were getting budgeted numbers, updates from HDL, and it was going to be about pretty close to $95 million in sales tax. So as I was putting this budget together, I increased our budget to about $94 million for sales tax. And that was below what their estimate was. And then I was starting to feel a little uneasy with the $94 million, but then we got some preliminary results for the fourth quarter of 2019. So in Contra Costa County, we had a really strong October, November, December. So our actuals that I put in for the budget estimate for the first 6 months is a little lower than where we're at. We're already at about a little over $51 million collected for the first 6 months. So my budget number here for sales tax, bringing it to 94, that's a conservative estimate that now seems like it's going to be most likely spot on. I think it's going to take a while for the economy here in Contra Costa to start to feel some of the effects and things to slow down around here. But with doing that, we're going to look into the next fiscal year, and we're probably going to come back with some revised numbers, some lower numbers, and I hate to get ahead of myself of next year's budget. But I wanted to just talk about, we listened to Jerome Powell and some of his levers. We don't really have levers here. The only levers we have here is the sales tax revenues and our interest earnings that we can kind of control a little bit. But when we put our fiscal year budget to you and we come in June and we put it out for the year, that's when Peter in the programs division comes back and he works with the bus transit and a lot of different programs that we allocate. Obviously, you guys know more than I do how our allocations work. We allocate out to the different districts. And what we've done over prior years is we allocate out 90%, just in case there's a recession. We don't get ahead of ourselves like we did many, many years ago where we overpaid everybody and then things came in less and we had the recession in 2008 and 9. So all of our programs are spot on. We allocate based off of our projections. Our projections, we're not going to go back and amend any of our contracts for programs at 94. They always get the extra money the following fiscal year when we true it up and we pay them out. The local streets and maintenance, we pay them out the 18% and the 2.09% based on actuals. So I just wanted to let you know, I do look at things conservatively. I want to track all of these things and make sure that we stay ahead of the curve should there be a recession coming this summer or into the next few fiscal years. So with that, I'm going to talk about the proposed summary of changes. In years past, we've had some large decreases on our revenues, and it's always based on the projects and where they are in the design, the construction, and the planning phases of that. Our projects section is always around 47-50% of our budget. But if we look at our revenues, I'm going to be increasing the sales tax revenues about $2.2 million. The next three, the federal, state, and local, that's always depending on construction and the projects division, where they are with these projects. Like on the SR4 680 interchange, there's a reduction of about $6 million because of utility. There's less utility expenses expected. So that's a big part of the decrease there. But if you look at state revenues and you go, wow, that's a huge number, $21 million increase. Why is it $21 million? Well, when we started the 684 project, we had an agreement with the state to get reimbursed. As we started the project, we were paying out, CCTA was paying out funds to the contractor because we have an agreement with them to pay. So we have resources such as our LAIF investments and also our bond proceeds to pay for some of the construction projects. Well, the state had a little slowdown in paying us on our reimbursements. So we didn't collect the $20 million last fiscal year that we thought we were going to collect this fiscal year. So probably about September, we collected an additional $20 million on expenditures from the prior fiscal year. So that's why there's that huge increase there. Investment other income, based on the economy, we noticed that the interest rates were starting to come down a little bit more. So I made an adjustment on some of our investment income on that particular piece. The bond proceeds, you're seeing a decrease of $6 million down to $15.5 million. That utilizes all of our bond proceeds from the 2017. In the prior fiscal year, I had projected we'd have about $21.5 million left over, but because of some of our construction billing with the state was a little delayed, I took out some extra money last year that was within budget, and I have now utilized all the construction funds there. So our other sources, so at the beginning of the year, we said we were going to use $70 million of resources to fund all the projects and programs from reserves. That's now been decreased to 26 because of that surplus of $21 million that came in this year that we weren't expecting. So I've increased the budget to accommodate those flow of funds in. So that So that leaves the other sources of $24 million. That is for earmarked funds from prior years and programs for all of our projects and programs and special projects. So with that, we have a decrease of about $6.3 million. I think I've covered a lot of information on this slide. I do have a lot of details on future slides, and I'll try and pull back now that I spent so much time on this piece. So we've talked about sales tax. In 2018, the state changed the way they were going to collect, and they tried to work with all the taxpayers. They said they were going to speed up collections to the agency, so we had that 6.8% because we got an extra quarter of interest, an extra payment of sales tax in that particular quarter. 2019, we still had a delay of about $2.2 million, which was from the prior fiscal year, which shows the really strong 6.8 and 6.3% increases. Based on our strategic plan and working with HDL, we thought we were going to be around the $92 million sales tax allocation for this year. Now I'm thinking it's going to be closer to $94 million, which is a good estimate. So as we look at our capital projects, we have a lot of different funding. We talked about the funding that's in there. I try and break out all of the individual funding. I work with our funding coordinator, Hisham, and I work with one of our consultants to help us reallocate and strategize where do we think we're going to be in this fiscal year. Through the extensive work with the projects team, Ivan, Stephanie, and Hisham, we all go through all the projects. We work with the agencies. We come up with where we're going to be and how fast and make changes to the different things. So there's a lot of work put in by them. And so we're going to increase our revenue projections by about $21 million. I talked about a lot of the state piece that makes a part of that. And then our planning, CMA, and PDA funding, we have some external funding that comes in from the federal transportation. We get about $1.2 million for the congestion management system. We have our state planning and programming and monitoring. It's about $695,000 that we're going to be collecting on some of our expenditures from the prior year. And then the CMA local agencies, that helps pay for the congestion management, and whatever we don't collect in revenue, we always have that 11.47% match, and that's estimated going to be about $265,000. The TFCA funding is always based off of our taxes or the funding collected on the cars that's allocated to us. That's going to be about $1.7 million. And then we also have the GoMenem funding program. So we're going to get about $1.7 million of the CalSTA funds that are coming in. We are projected to receive about $428,000 from the Bay Area Quality Management District. And then we also have a contribution from the GoMenem program of $270,000 to pay for some staff charges. So when individuals like Jack Hall are working on some of the projects, they allocate their time to that section, and we charge them, and we charge those, and we get reimbursed from a deposit that was given to us last fiscal year. So when we look at the capital projects, it's about $94 million, and that's just for the Measure J programs in there. So you can see that we have about $94.8 million in capital projects. Obviously, the large one in there is the 680 SR4 interchange, which is $31 million. And then as you go across the board, you can see I break out into columns where the funding's coming from. So the East County Corridors SR4 bypass is an increase of about $1 million. It's $4.8 million, and that was to close out the program. If you remember a couple of years ago, they said go use Measure J funds first, and then we'll pay at the end. We're at the end of the project. We're now going through the acceptance process. I believe it's almost finalized, so we got the $4.8 million. We had some other local funding in there for $575,000. The big one in there, the big project we have going on is the 684 interchange. You can see that we're projecting to only spend about $31 million, but we're going to collect $41. Again, that's the delay from last fiscal year. So there's a $10 million if you think, but CIP projects are always multi-year projects. So you start out and you continue. Once the project's done, you will collect on as you invoice through the next year or so, depending on how quickly we can get the invoices out and get paid. The I-680 corridor, the HOV, we have a lot of contracts that are coming to you recently to the board. They're moving along quite fast. They're trying to speed it up. You can see that it's up about $50 million. We're going to collect about $21 million on that, $20 million on that. And so we're going to use resources, Measure J resources that have been earmarked from prior fiscal years to pay that particular piece. Again, this is just a change on the top projects from Measure J. You can see individually, and then in the staff report, we kind of give some language as to why these things, like the BART. East County Rail has been delayed a little bit. There's a $2.6 million reduction there. Closeout on the Balfour, which is the reduction of 1.5. Again, utility costs coming in a lot less than anticipated last year when we did this, $6.5 million. And speeding up the construction on the 680 HOV lanes is the increase of 4.4. And then we have some regional projects that we work with other agencies to complete there. So with that, we always go into the administration. The administration budget is $5.1 million. It's only an $84 million increase. We're typically around $3.4 million, but the big item in there is the $2.7 million that we earmarked for the TEP and then for paying for the measure to be put on the ballot this month. And we're going to use Measure C reserves that we've been holding on to using for special situation like this. Salaries and benefits are about $824,000 for the admin. It's a little higher this year because we don't have the PPM. The PPM will come back next year, but it's a one-time piece, and it falls below the 1% limitation. But when next year, when we have some earmarked PPM funds to come in, we'll be able to allocate some position time to specific projects and reduce it back down to where we are, usually around 79-80% on that particular piece. The authority-wide salaries show increases based off of the project study we did probably last August. There were some salary increases there. We have had some vacancies. I kept the salary same as I didn't want to reduce it. I may be back to the board in June to get authority. What I want to do is use the budgeted surplus that we may have, depending on where things look in the next couple of months, to pay down our OPEB and our pension liabilities with whatever savings or surplus we have in there. I do have some good news. I hate to go outside of the budget just a little bit, but every 2 years we work on our OPEB analysis. So that's our health benefit that we pay for our retirees. Based on the economy the last 2 years and based on some actions we have done over the last several years in keeping our payments when we make payroll, it's about 9.9% of our payroll we pay to the OPEB piece. Because of that, we just received a report back last week that we finalized, and we have a $400,000 surplus in there. With everything we've seen in the economy right now, it looks like with interest earnings that we earn every year, it could come back down. So we're in a good position. One of the recommendations that came out of it is to reduce maybe our contribution from 9.9% to possibly 6%. But when I bring the budget to you in June, I'm going to keep it at 9.9% because I want to make sure that we stay funded. We have 14 more years of the measure. I want to make sure that when we end the measure, this current measure, that we have good funding for the retirees. So I will probably be bringing back in June a report, just kind of go over some of the highlights of that report, but I wanted to give you the good news piece on that. The program section is increasing about $1.9 million. Again, this is all based off of sales tax information and budgets that we have. We issue contracts for the ferry service. We give a percentage of the funding for them. We pay quarterly, and at the end there's a true-up, and last year we received a refund. This year, what we started to do is when we passed the measure, we had a small piece earmarked and that we were collecting money on that goes into a separate account. Additional transportation for livable community projects. This year we started working on some of those projects, and it's the Richmond 13th Street and Hercules Rail Station projects that we've earmarked, and we've budgeted about $1.4 million this year. Again, the $18.9 million for local street maintenance. And then we have the GoMentum program. The GoMentum program has built up some speed. We have some CalSTA funding. We had a grant of about $3.5 million. We received some funds last year. The Momentum program is increasing $1.1 million. The reason for the increase is we're paying AAA for some site improvements as part of our agreement. So as we collect the money, we pay out on these funds. And so between the CalSTA money and then the money we're getting from the Bay Area Quality, those funds will be used to keep the Momentum program going. Our planning division, I worked with Matt on this. So as their projects come to fruition, sometimes there's delays, sometimes there's projects that are completed early. So we go through every 6 months and even sometimes every quarter, we go through and look at those and kind of see where they are in their contracts. So based on timing of some of these projects, we're reducing the budget about $100,000. Debt service, we issued the bonds in 2018, so we really kind of have a good feel for where we are on the bonds, so there'll be no changes on the debt service. I have been meeting with several underwriters about some options for us because, as you know, in August, the swap is, we have the option to enter and make some changes. Interest rates is a big deal for CCTA and these fixed rate notes and the swaps. So when we closed the fiscal year last year, we had the swap value, since we reduced it $100 million in 2018, it was about $21 million. So $24.1 million. So at 12/31, the economy was still going well. Everything was, it was all about the China trade agreement. It was about $24.8 million. Since then, in just 2 months, at the end of February, it's jumped all the way to $31.3 million. So if we hadn't got out of that swap agreement for the $100 million, and it obviously would be double. We'd be looking at like $62, $63, $64 million. So as I'm meeting with the underwriters, there's good news and bad news with the lower interest rates. If you have a home mortgage, now is the time to go refinance and things like that because interest rates are so low. But when we're tied to the swap, there's that swap penalty. If you want to get out of the loan, it's $32 million to get out of that loan. And that's a tough sell. But with interest rates so low, you may be able to refinance. You may be able to refinance and pay this off. Yes, you have to tell the board members, we're going to pay $32 million to get out of an agreement we did in 2009. That's horrible. But you can go reissue at a lower interest rate. You can get a swap. You can get a premium on the bonds that you issue that pays for it. And there still can be a net savings in there. You can refinance some of the existing bonds that we have that have a 5% coupon, bake all of that in and kind of have a net neutral or a $5 million savings, not have to go back and renegotiate every 3 years, 5 years, which is going to cost $700 to $1 million every 3 to 5, 7 years, depending on how we do it. So that will be coming back to the board in July. I've been working with K&N to come back and give you some information so that we're prepared. Who knows? They're talking about negative interest rates. Hopefully we can come back with some good news, some options, give you guys a couple of things that how comfortable you feel, give you some real facts that if we were to do this, it's going to cost this, and so we can move forward. With that, I conclude my presentation.
Anybody have any questions?
Couldn't you end
knew
it
Neil
on
would
one
have
of
one.
those other notes? But I appreciate, Brent, it's amazing how you spoke without looking at your notes on the complexity of the things that have to be tracked. Our cities aren't this complicated. I know we all appreciate what you do. I think you, by the way, have stepped up into this role and taken it to another level, a much higher level. Yeah, the swap makes us nervous. And you're right, negative interest rates. Wow, that would really, who knows what that would mean for that at this point. But otherwise, I think the news all sounds great. Appreciate your sort of laser focus on all of these really critical issues. And you're right, it may sound like a big number on the swap, but just like last time, we saved a ton of money. A ton of money. It was one of our really good. And our credit rating, as you know, because of the way you as staff run this organization, is so high of a rating that given these low interest rates, there could be an enormous positive position for us. So thank you.
Bob?
Just as a refresher note to my commissioner to my left, Brentwood trains people very well.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion to? Okay. Motion from Pierce, second from Geringer. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Good job, Brian.
Yeah, next item is item 8, authorization to issue request for proposal number 20-1 for General Counsel Legal Services.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. This item is being brought forth this morning to seek authorization to issue a request for proposals for General Counsel Legal Services. We've been with Best Besson Krieger since June of 2011. We've amended the agreement twice, and the agreement is now set to expire again on June 30th. So at this time, we're faced with two options, either extending that agreement or going out with the request for proposals to solicit proposals from other firms. Staff's work has evolved since 2011 when we entered into that agreement. We've added a construction program. We're administering construction contracts and an innovation program, just to name a few. So with that, in an effort to spread the wealth of the work, we decided that it would be in the best interest for us to go out with a request for proposals to seek proposals from other interested firms. We are seeking a 3-year term with 2 one-year extension options. It's an agreement based on a fixed retainer with hourly rates for specialized services. We have spoken with Mala and informed her of our decision and also encouraged them to submit a proposal. So at this time, we are seeking authorization to release requests for proposals 20-1 to solicit proposals from interested firms to provide general counsel legal services. I'll take any questions that you have at this time.
So moved.
Thank you.
Okay, motion by Ornrich, second by Geringer.
Question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, one comment, and I appreciate this. This is something that we do on a regular basis for our auditors. We go out and kind of survey the landscape and see what's out there. I think this is a really practical thing to do. It's not a comment on current service at all. It's just doing our due diligence. The one thing in reading through the RFP that I do think we should add, because using Planet Bid, I think, is a fabulous tool. The one thing I think I would put in here is a caution to all applicants to allow themselves enough time to go through the bid process and entering it into the program, so that if they find there's a glitch somewhere from the automated program, that they leave themselves time to fix it. We have experience with that in our construction project. This is probably not quite the same, but on the other hand, an abundance of caution to leave themselves enough time. Don't leave it till 17 minutes before the deadline. Right. No, I understand, but if they have a glitch trying to upload something or format isn't working right, it's always just a good idea to give a caution to make sure.
We can add that to the RFP.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It's unanimous. Next, item 9, correspondence and news clippings. Any questions or comments on that? Item 10, commissioner and staff comments. Any comments from the chair? None. Commissioners' comments? Julie?
I just want to thank everybody for all their hard work over the last many months to try and help get Measure J passed. We all spent a lot of time giving out a lot of information about what this expenditure plan would mean to our community. I think, as Mark noted earlier, there's been a bit of a buzzsaw statewide, probably nationwide, once we do the analysis of what happened on Tuesday. I know that there's a lot tied up in this. It's not just our transportation measure. There's a mentality, a feeling across the country that has tipped a scale a little bit, and we got caught by that. But I just want to say thank you to everybody who tried really hard. Thank you to our staff who worked so hard over the last year plus to try to put something really innovative together. And you haven't heard from us for the last time, but we got to reevaluate how we go forward as a state to fund transportation.
Newell?
I would just add to that. I think maybe a slightly different perspective is, one, we did a fabulous job. The plan is still great. I wouldn't change anything in it. It didn't pass because of the plan. Everybody thought it was a great plan. Really did. Right. I mean, across the board. It didn't pass for one reason. People have tax fatigue, and there's a perception, well, I've already paid for this. Didn't we just do this? And I made a comment last night with Channel 2 that people don't realize for the past 42 years, since 1978, almost every tax measure, with the exception of Prop 1A, all have sunset clauses. And we have the same problem in school bonds. Well, I already paid for school bonds. Yeah, but it has a sunset. It's only a certain amount of time that this revenue stream will last. And the same thing in this case. And the sad part is people really didn't hear this message. If you like traffic the way it is now, vote no. If you don't like it, vote yes. Otherwise, wait 16 years and there will be nothing done for 16 years in this county. People said, I didn't know that. And I think because their first reaction was, well, I've already done a transportation tax. They don't realize these sunset clauses, and it's the only way to get passed for a 2/3 majority. We could dream in a world like Prop 1A where we pass a revenue source, quit wasting public resources to have to keep going out to do this, because these are ongoing problems. This isn't like building one-off items. And I just think in the clutter of what was going on and the evidence, as Julie, as you said, none of these measures passed statewide. But people really aren't up to the level of knowledge of knowing that ongoing problems and solutions need ongoing funding sources, and they're not. They all have stops on them. So it's sad that that happened, but I agree. I think this really was one of the most forward-thinking 21st century plans probably anywhere in the western United States at this point in time. And I don't know right now. I wouldn't suggest what we would do, but we really had a great plan and great staff. Every single person here did a stellar job.
Any other comments? Comments from executive staff?
Commissioners, I have a couple comments. One, don't forget Tuesday, 6th Annual Redefining Mobility Summit. We weighed back and forth on the virus and all those issues, but we're continuing forward. We have the main room and we have an overflow room, and so there'll be options to watch and listen from both venues. We are working on what we call a continuity of business plan, and I use this only to tell you that we're working on making sure that we can conduct business if, God forbid, we have people that have to be quarantined or those issues. And I think we all need to think about that. How do we conduct business? So we've kind of analyzed what are those key functions that we have to do as an agency, and can we do them with half staff, with everybody off-site. The good news is, because of the paperless program, we've implemented some things that now that we can achieve doing a laptop work from anywhere in the world. And so we're using SharePoint, so all the data now is stored in the cloud, so we can access that from anywhere. We're looking at making sure that we have a new software package to develop the packets, because everything revolves around the packet, and so we're implementing PrimeGov. It's been a long journey to implement that, and we've received training, and so hopefully we can access our templates, build the packets from somewhere else. Brian's looking at making sure that we can access the network without any attacks and those kinds of things, but hit enter and print. So we have access to the printer. So we're looking at that. I mention this because we're also going to put together some of the issues that we have with, let's say we only have 5 board members that can make the meeting here. Then the Brown Act allows for board members to teleconference in, but you have to, there's some issues with accessibility to your house and opening up your house and those kinds of things. So we just want to make sure that you're all aware of what the rules are.
Expose the public, but we have to have it open.
Yeah, what the rules are there. So,
Through the screen door thing.
yeah, so I wanted to introduce our new planning director, John Wong. John has worked for CCAG for 14 years in their planning area. He actually is a Richmond resident, Mayor, and he commuted for 14 years from Richmond to San Mateo.
Wow.
And so he is actually, his commute is a lot shorter. Prior to that, he spent time at MTC, and then a long time ago at Caltrans. He actually worked with Ray Acali back there. So, John, do you want to say anything? Some people say that he doesn't get really excited. He says he does that on purpose. But I said we're a very excitable group, and so it's okay to be excited about your job.
Very excited. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chair Butt and committee members. I am very excited to be here working for the CCTA. And mostly, I'm looking forward to working and serving the commissioners, working for Randy and working with the CCTA team. Like Randy mentioned, I bring 28 years of experience working at the state, regional, and county level. And my purpose here is to help CCTA and help the board and serve the commissioners. Thank you very much.
Any other comments from anybody? Any other business? Next meeting, April 2nd, 2020, 8:30 a.m. This meeting is adjourned.
Good job, Chair.
Yeah, I don't think we could have put a better measure out, you know?
No.
I mean, there's no regrets.
No.
Just,
Yeah. The plan is really good. This is just, we hit a buzzsaw. We hit a political buzzsaw.
I could kill
And-
the CIA.
Oh, yeah, we all could.